Smerconish.
Patti Davis is the daughter of Nancy and Ronald Reagan, the author of many books, both fiction and nonfiction, including Floating in the Deep End and The Long Goodbye. She's a frequent contributor to the New York Times and now author of a brand new book, Dear Mom and Dad, a letter about family, memory, and the America we once knew. It is really a privilege for me to have you here. I love your book on so many levels. It's beautifully written. It's an insight into you. It's an insight into your parents. And frankly, it's an insight into all of us because families are complicated. I want to begin by reading from page 128. Quote, someone advised me that removing the male plants too early could be a problem, not just because you'd have no seeds at all, but because the female plant wants so badly to be pollinated that it will turn hermaphrodite and pollinate itself. I've never independently verified this, and it's possible that the person giving me this tip was completely stoned, so I don't know if it's true, but it's a colorful detail. When I moved into my little cabin, I didn't have room to grow all the crops I'd been raising, but I cleared a space on the side of the mountain for my pot plants. I am a gardener. Maybe that's the reason I was taken with it. Maybe there are other reasons I was taken with it. I don't know. But you got to tell the story. So you're in the cabin, you're growing your own weed, and your parents now come for dinner. What happened?
Well, before that, this was totally not the passage I thought you were going to read. I couldn't stop laughing. There were two installments there. First, my mother came, we were in one of our rapprochements and she came into Topanga Canyon to see me, and you couldn't even see my little cabin from the road. You know, it's like down this long wooden stairway and on the side of a mountain, and there was no heat. There was just a fireplace for heat and stuff. Anyway, so it was October, which is harvest time for pot plants, and you hang them upside down. So I had, in this little pantry area, I had all these cup hooks and I had my plants hanging down there. So I carried them to my next door neighbors. And I said, can you babysit my pot plants? My mother's coming for lunch. And keep them upside down. So I took them over there. My mother comes, she's looking around my little place, which took 5 minutes because it was so little. And she went, what are those hooks up there? And I said, well, the people who rented the place before me were very tall and they put their coffee cups up there. So they just like reached to get their coffee cup. It's all I could think of, right? So then cut to a little bit, sometime months after that, it was no longer harvest time. I think I had new plants growing and my parents came for dinner. And I wasn't worried about them seeing the plants because it was dark when they came. I was worried about them falling down the wooden stairway because I only had one like gas light thing there. I told my father to bring a flashlight and anyway, so they came and they're sitting in my living room, and my father said, you know, this was in between the presidential efforts. It was before 1980. And he said, you know, in Topanga, I still get informed about a lot of things. And in Topanga, they're going to start bringing a lot of people are growing marijuana here. And they're going to start bringing helicopters over and looking for marijuana plants. I wasn't worried about mine because the way my hillside was, I had been assured by a friend of mine who had been in Vietnam as a helicopter pilot that they couldn't really see from my hillside. But I started calling the next day. I started calling all the other people in the canyon who I knew grew pot and told them that my father said the helicopters are coming, and they all took nobody got busted. And, you know, one of the guys then ended up saying to me, you know, man, that was so helpful. Could you thank your father for warning us?
Can I say, as I read that part of your book, by the way, I don't know if you can see my copy, but it's all thumb-tabbed and marked up and notated.
Oh, I love that.
So
that's like an author's dream.
I couldn't help but wonder, do you think he really did know? Is it possible that he thought like, hey, my daughter Patti, she's the rebel. Maybe she's growing weed. Maybe I should tell this to her.
No, I really don't think he knew. I mean, he probably assumed that I got stoned, but for him to make that leap to, oh, and she's probably industrious enough that she could really grow these plants. No, I don't think
Patty,
that
when
occurred to
when
me.
my dad was older and unfortunately end of life, he became very anxious, very very anxious, and it was kind of sad because he lost a lot of confidence. And I had conversations with him, and I said to him, Dad, I think weed would help you. He never smoked weed. I never gave him any gummies. But my father, who was much like your dad in being sort of, textbook conservative, like my dad was open
Yeah.
at least to the dialogue. And I think about your dad as being so one with nature. Like it's not far-fetched for me to sit here today and think that Ronald Reagan among us in 2024 might smoke weed.
I don't know. He was a pretty stubborn person and he got ideas. Well, first of all, actually, I think one aspect why he wouldn't was that his father was an alcoholic.
Right.
So he would have viewed anything that could possibly be addictive in any way. I mean, he had a cocktail once in a while, a glass of wine once in a while, but anything outside of that, I don't think he would have for that reason. But also, I think he had in his head, those were the years that people were saying, well, grass leads to heroin or something. It's
Yeah.
what was it?
Yep.
A gateway
Gateway drug. And by the way, your mom, just say no to drugs.
Yeah. Well, she meant well. I mean, listen, as a former drug addict, no was not in my vocabulary.
Right.
If someone had said to me, say no, I would have gone, I'm sorry, just say what? Wouldn't have registered. But she meant well.
So I revered your father in the 80s, so much so that, you took your last name from your mother. One of our sons has a middle name truly based on your father, Wilson. I wasn't going to go with Ronald, but I did go with Wilson. And I still hold your dad on a pedestal. I came of age politically with a different set of political views than Patti Davis. I was nervous reading the book that I would think less of him, that there were going to be insights in the book that would cause me to question his authenticity, maybe because I had your autobiography on the brain. But there was none of that.
Oh, God.
There was none of that in the
Get that out
book.
of your brain.
But there was none of that in the book, and particularly on matters of faith. There are a couple of things that you say in the book. You saw white light around him after the shooting. He spoke to you and told a story about being in Britain and have to make a movie, I guess. And one night, he was rustled awake and he felt hands on his shoulder. And there's a beautiful story about you ask him, did you turn around? I don't want to give it all away. He has an answer for that. Nancy D., your horse dies and he looks up to the heaven. Everybody's crying. And yet he's not smiling, but he's appreciative. And when you ask him, he says, I'm thinking about all the great years that I had with her. I mean, he was the real deal on an authenticity basis, especially on faith. Is that fair?
That is very fair. This book is a lot about faith and a lot about the faith that he instilled in me and that literally saved my life. I write in here about being 19 years old, strung out on drugs, not grass. I was strung out on amphetamines for a very long time in my life, and sitting in a bathroom at Northwestern University with a razor blade at my wrist, and I just didn't want to go on. And I heard in my heart and in my head my father telling me that God put everyone here for a reason. And I thought, this could not be it. I mean, God could not be planning this for me. And it literally saved my life. And that idea has trailed me and tugged at me throughout my life. Not that I always listened to it, but it ultimately was what led me to write this book and to work on these challenges with my family, to work on seeing my family differently after putting so much messiness out in the world, because I'm a writer and writers just put everything out there, regretfully sometimes. But, it kept propelling me down this road to look at my family differently, to think about it differently, to come to a place of compassion and understanding and forgiveness and all of that, that was my father's lessons in faith. And my father, when I was a child, he would say to me, you can talk to God about anything. You don't have to clean yourself up to go to God. God can handle your mess. That was the kind of conversation.
Okay, so but where are you? Where are you? Where are you today? Where are you personally today on matters of faith?
My faith is an anchor in my life. I mean, I can't say that I am a prescribed religion. I would say that my faith is sort of an amalgam of maybe Eastern and Western, Um, I wrote in here, I used to have a recurring dream about meeting Jesus on the beach and sitting down and talking to him when I was a little girl. So he's still a figure in my faith. But I do believe that we've lived before, and there is a thing called karma, and we will live again.
Well,
So,
I
like I
loved
said, my faith is kind of in
I loved at different points in the book. By the way, this is Patti Davis, and the book is called Dear Mom and Dad. It's a letter to her parents, Nancy and Ronald Reagan. There's so many things in the book that I wanted to comment on. But how about this? Inauguration night, you're sleeping in the Lincoln bedroom, and you hear the pitter-patter of feet, and it is President Reagan, having just been inaugurated, who comes into the room, has a conversation with you. The gist of it is to say, I know this is hard for you, and I know this asks a lot of you, that you're my daughter and I'm now the president. But he tells you, I believe I can make a difference. And I wondered if there was something providential about that. Did he feel like he'd been selected for this role, given what we were just discussing, the larger picture of faith?
I think he did. I think he always did. I think I've said before, and I wrote in here, that if you want to understand Ronald Reagan, you have to understand that everything about him bounced off the fact that he was the child of an alcoholic. And I've read a lot about children of alcoholics in order to try to understand him better. And, he really embodied the idea that I am not going to fall down and fail like my father did. His father couldn't keep a job because he would drink it away. And so I think my father always had an idea that he was put here for a purpose, for a bigger purpose, to make a difference in this world. And a lot of people have said over the years, and I'm sure truly believe it, that he wouldn't have been president, he wouldn't have reached those heights without my mother. I don't believe that. I mean, she certainly was very helpful
Right.
and was his partner, absolutely. But I think he was always destined for that. I felt that as a little girl. I remember as a little girl, I think I wrote about this in here. I remember as a little girl learning about Abraham Lincoln being shot and thinking and getting scared, because I thought, my father's going to be president one day and he might get shot. I told almost nobody that. I told one friend that. And when my father got shot, that friend called me up and said, you kind of predicted this.
Your relationship with your mom was fraught. To your mother at the end, you write this: I kept wondering what our lives might have been like, what you might have been like, if our family hadn't been broken into pieces so long ago. For those who've not yet read Dear Mom and Dad, they might think that there was one juncture, one break point. If there were, it's lost on me. It just seemed like it was an accumulation of things that caused Patti Davis to say, our family, frankly, like a lot of families, was broken.
Yeah. I mean, we were, I likened it to that phrase in that passage in the Bible about building a house on rock versus building a house on sand.
Right.
The passage in the Bible had to do with faith, but families are like that too. If you build the family on no foundation, on sand, that's what you're going to have. You're going to have something that crumbles every time the wind blows and the storms come. But what I also write about is when I look at my home movies, or I look at old photographs when I was quite young, before 6, when my brother was born, and it was just the 3 of us. My mother does look like she embraced the idea of motherhood. There is tenderness there is love there is joy in being the mother of this chubby little toddler, right? But it fractured and it fell apart. And I think I've described us as America and Russia, just sort of locked in this Cold War. And I remember thinking when I was a little girl that I had lived, I don't remember what language I used, but I remember lying in bed as a young girl thinking, I've known my parents before, like in another life, like this triangle has gone on before and something went wrong with it. And I don't know what, but it's being played out now. Like I said, I don't remember what language I used, but I remember the feeling.
There are many points in the book where you return to the old neighborhood, actually old neighborhoods. This is something that we have in common. I love going back to the street where I was born and raised. Mine kind of looks the same from your description in the book. Yours apparently looks nothing like it because everything's been developed. As a matter of fact, I happen to know a guy who bought your old house, or one of the two of the old houses, and put up a mansion. He's the Jersey guy. I'm not gonna he's the athletic guy. But I wanted to ask Patti Davis, why do you?
So that was the Amalfi.
Yeah, why do you go back to the old neighborhood?
Oh, it stirs up memories for me. It's so interesting because when I walk on those streets, particularly the street where the General Electric house was built, which is no longer there. Now it's a huge mansion. But it's so interesting because I kind of walk there in like a split screen in my mind. I can see it how it was, and I see it how it is, But those memories are so close to me. A split screen is the best way that I can describe it. And then if I walk up on the hill behind our house, that pretty much looks, well, it looks the same except the top of it used to be our kite flying hill, and now there's a house up there. But a lot of it looks the same, So it's just, I don't know, it's just returning to those memories, just sort of feeling those memories brush past me.
A final subject, and thank you for being so gracious with your time, and I promise not to give it all away. You've referenced already going through a dark period at Northwestern. You went through a dark period as well in the mid-'90s, and you say that it was your dad's Alzheimer's that were your life raft, that when he went into that stage of his life, it was oddly a saving grace for you. Will you speak to that in 60 seconds?
Absolutely. Yeah, I had gotten divorced, then I gotten into an abusive relationship. I did what I'm prone to do. I ran away. I thought I'm going to run away to the East Coast where I knew nobody. And I sold my house at the bottom of the market. I lost pretty much everything. And I was exhausted emotionally, and I felt like why am I here? There's no reason for me to be here. No one will miss me. I kind of got back. I was sort of that 19-year-old girl again, not with the razor blade, but I mean, I was in that mindset. And at that time, my father was diagnosed with Alzheimer's. And I thought, okay, and wrote his letter to the country and to the world. And I thought, if he can handle this with so much grace, I need to be here for this. I want to be here for this, which means I have to grow up. I have to let go of whatever is wounding me, and I have to step up, and I have to be present for this, and I want to be present for this. So in a way, he kind of has saved my life twice in my life.
On that note, thank you so much. Thanks for writing the book. Thanks for your willingness to come by and be so gracious with your time. I thoroughly enjoyed it. It's a book that'll speak to everybody, by the way. R's, D's, independence. It's really a book about life, more than it is a book about the Reagans. At least that's what I thought. It's called Dear Mom and Dad, and Patti Davis is the author. Thank you, Patti. It's nice to make your acquaintance.
Thank you so much. I really enjoyed this.
Me too.